They called him the kindest man in Hollywood. Kind to such a quiet degree, over time, Hollywood started to regard him more as an anomaly, something too mild to survive a culture of ego and fanfare. For 40 years, Keanu Reeves glided through fame as if he were just a ghost with a pulse. Never boisterous, never grasping, always solid. Behind that steady demeanor, he had experienced loss beyond comprehension, burying the friend and soulmate and losing the child he conceived and the love that he will forever mourn. Still, he never changed. Patient, deferential, present. But this is the question nobody ever asks of those who are like him. What happens when your kindness isn't seen for what it is? Because that mistake was where it all changed. And what would transpire on The View would become one of the most replayed moments in television for years, not for chaos, not for screams, but for quiet, precise, steadfast, unmoving quiet. Keanu Reeves did not shout. He did not defend himself. He just sat there. And in doing so, shifted the room. But how did it all get to that? The studio that morning was palpably different. Not in a way anyone could explain, but with the silent apprehension we feel right before a massive event is about to occur. Was it the guest roster? Was it expectation? Because Keanu Reeves never usually appeared on a daytime talk show. He wasn't a celebrity that participated in publicity tours and constant promotion of his work. He came only when he had something significant to say and vanished as quietly as he'd arrived. Sitting quietly opposite the panel. Hands relaxed, expression calm beyond belief. "Welcome to The View, Keanu," Whoopi Goldberg said with a huge smile. "It's been too long." "Thank you for having me," he replied calmly. Just like that, the entire atmosphere relaxed. The studio audience answered immediately, a surge of applause that hit like a wave of recognition. They knew him, not just as an actor, but as someone who they'd watched grow up on screen. Bill and Ted, The Matrix, John Wick, it wasn't so much fame as a dynasty, but beneath the calm surface. Can you feel it? Because not every single person in that room was here for a trip down memory lane. Sarah Haynes initiated with pleasantries, new films, ongoing projects, creative outlets. Keanu answered in calm, calculated phrases. His response about outcome was humble and insightful. He didn't even mention how much he loved working with Jonah Hill. It wasn't about himself as much as it was about the project. Talking about his upcoming film with Ruben Stlund, The Entertainment System is Down, wasn't with fanfare, but with a quiet acknowledgement of the challenge. Ballerina and the continuation of John Wick's universe were approached in much the same way. He spoke with admiration rather than excitement, someone whose focus is the craft over the glamour. Then came what I thought was the harmless question. "You're 61 and you still do these massive action sequences," Sarah said. "How do you manage?" A gentle smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that is disarming without attempting to be. "Training," he replied. "So much training, and great people surrounding me. The stunt coordinator, the performers, people who make me look far more capable than I am." A modest answer. Almost too modest, because in that split second, a almost imperceptible change flickered across the table, and only one person was poised for it. Joy Behar had been quiet. Not inattentive, not preoccupied, but quietly, attentively, waiting. If you knew her style, that stillness. The subtle flick of the eyes toward her notes. The composed pre-bomb that quietness before a well-placed question was the calm before the inevitable. And there it was. "Keanu," Joy said, and just the slightest shift of the air. "I have a question for you that's been bothering me for quite some time." The studio collectively exhaled. Keanu turned his focus toward her entirely. Calm, receptive, and for just a fleeting moment the air in the room was still. "I understand," Keanu said gently. "What do you want to know?" Joy didn't hesitate. "This whole nice guy act," she continued, flicking her hand toward Keanu in a near imperceptible gesture. The stories about giving up your seat on the subway and helping strangers with car troubles and all those donations you make to your co stars. It's all very admirable. But don't you feel people are starting to ask themselves, is this guy for real? The mood in the studio shifted just like that. Not in a subtle way, not even a slight one, just like that. There was a deafening silence, so complete it was tangible. The camera operators appeared rooted to the spot. Any slight movement would shatter the fragile moment. Joy Behar had spoken the unspeakable thought that Keanu Reeves might be play acting his persona for all of us. Yet, Keanu made no move. No sharp breath of air. No angry glare. No cowering stance. He just stared at Joy. He seemed utterly calm, utterly composed, and utterly unreadable. Then he answered, "Play acting at what?" A couple of members in the audience chuckled nervously, and Joy smirked, but there was a coldness to her eyes. "Oh, come on now," she said, leaning in. "No one can be that selfless that many times in a row. Nobody gives away millions for no reason. 40 years in Hollywood, you must know the game better than most." Several of the other hosts shifted awkwardly in their seats. Whoopi Goldberg slowly and deliberately picked up her mug as if bracing for a moment when she might have to intervene. But Keanu gently held up a hand. Not to cut her off. To press pause on the entire situation. "I think," he stated in that same even tone, "you might be mistaking kindness for performance. They are quite different." Joy wasn't fazed. "In Hollywood, every single thing is performance," she replied. "Every interview, every public appearance, every time you give to charity, it's all just your brand. And your brand is just that. You're the nice guy." Keanu nodded slowly, as though he were weighing her opinion instead of outright dismissing it. "That's an interesting theory," he responded. Then he met her gaze. "May I ask you something?" he asked. Joy blinked in slight surprise. She had expected something argumentative, defensive, perhaps angry even, not inquisitiveness. "What is it?" she cautiously responded. Keanu's voice was still soft, but a sharper edge seemed to emerge from beneath the words. "When you believe all kindness must be strategically calculated. What is that indicative of about the way that you view the world?" The words hung in the air, not forcefully, but with exact precision. Joy was quiet for a beat or two. The room grew tense again, but the tension was different now, as if the conversation had turned to face inward. She opened her mouth. It closed. Then she finally let go. "I'm not a cynic. I'm a realist. People have reasons. Everybody has an angle." "Everybody?" Keanu repeated very softly. "That's a lot of people not to trust." Joy's jaw tensed. "I don't have to not trust people. I just don't believe in people who seem too good to be true." Keanu leaned back just a little further, and then something else in the room had shifted. The softness in him had not gone. It was like the lightness in the room suddenly became a great heaviness. "Joy," he said after a long pause, "there's a story about me I rarely tell during interviews." The studio went quiet. Even Joy's expression flickered, ever so subtly. "All right," she whispered cautiously. Keanu took in a breath. "When I was younger," he began, "my best friend River Phoenix died in my arms at the age of 23. Nobody made a sound. The most talented person I've ever known was dead." His voice did not crack, but there was something more solid in it than sadness. Control held in place by the sheer weight of memories. "A few years later," he continued, "my girlfriend Jennifer and I had a daughter coming. A girl. We were planning on naming her Ava." The quiet had now become profound. "Stillborn. Ava. Christmas Eve of 1999. A pause. 8 months pregnant." Joy's face had gone slack. "Jennifer never came back from it. The sadness of it all. We tried to make it work after that, you know. But it just tore us apart. We were no longer together, yet still together." Another pause. "And then we had finally started to fall back in love when..." She was killed in a car crash. The room seemed smaller somehow, heavier too. Keanu dropped his head for a moment and then slowly looked up again. I don't think anyone would ever know this about me. I remember asking myself for many years why it was that I was still here. A beat. Why is it that I lived and they died? Silence. And then I made a choice. He says calmly, I decided if I'm going to stay alive, I should try and make the world I live in a little bit better than I found it. He looks at Joy. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't anger. It was just calm. It's not because I wanted attention. It's not to build a brand. It's because it's the only thing I understand anymore. Joy looked so white. Whatever follow-up she had been composing, whatever abrupt turn she had intended for her conversation, it all faded in real time, quietly, as Keanu Reeves continued. But Keanu was far from done. You want to know why I give away my salary? Keanu's voice remained steady. Because I remember how empty the pockets felt. Because the people in the crew work just as hard, or harder than I do, and aren't credited in the same ways. Money has never had the same pull for me as making people feel seen, valued. The studio fell silent. Keanu tilted forward a bit, his stare steady, his frame almost locked in an anchor. You want to know why I give away my seat on the subway? Keanu continued. Because someone else might have a greater need than I do. That's it. It's not strategic. It's not calculated. It's just seeing another person and choosing to respond. Joy attempted to steer the interview back on its tracks. All of that is so moving, but you have to admit that's precisely why people are suspicious. Nice guys don't really exist in this industry. Joy half smiled at him, her own words sounding hollow. A tiny smile, no hint of humor or lightness in it, just the tired, ancient echo of a sigh curved Keanu's lips. You are correct. It's a tough industry. I've seen it tear up even good people, Keanu replied softly. But I've also seen one act of kindness utterly change an outcome. One small thing makes someone's whole day, and how crew members recall to this day, years later, someone simply taking the time to learn their name and ask about them. His voice fell even lower and sharpened. You know what I find curious, Joy, is that you are so set on proving that kindness is just not a thing. Everyone is cynical on the inside. A pause. And I'm curious as to what made you think that. The question was not asked like an insult. It was asked like a mirror. Joy turned bright red. For the first time, she looked worried, not anxious like she had all episode. She looked exposed. I am not cynical, she said fast. I am realistic. That's where we differ. Keanu paused. Then, quiet. Is it? Another pause. Because from where I'm standing, you have built an entire house on the idea that everyone is secretly malicious, that genuine emotion has to be a scam, and every single person who sits in that seat is up to something. The other hosts shifted uneasily. The tension in the room could no longer be described as subtle, and the audience felt it. No one had seen the Keanu Reeves that they were seeing now. No, he was not angry, but clear, precise, inescapable, and the clarity was the weapon, not the anger. That's not fair, Joy stammered. I ask tough questions. That's what I'm paid to do. Keanu nodded once. No, he said even. Tough questions are to reveal what is hidden. Tough questions are to hold power to account. A pause. What you have been doing the past 10 minutes has not been asking tough questions. His tone remained calm, but his words began to sting. This is character assassination posing as journalism. Joy's mouth opened to speak, but no words would come out right away. He continued in a leisurely pace now, like someone careful with each syllable. You took someone who has been trying to navigate life for decades, and doing so with grace. Someone who has given when they have been able. Someone who has tried to make better the lives of those around them when they could. He trailed off for a moment. And the conclusion you draw from it, instinctively, is that it's fabricated. A beat passed. And the effect that has, who does that serve? The audience is entitled to know what's real, Joy blurted out, but her voice cracked a little. He let out a quiet puff of air that could have been a laugh. The truth? He repeated, then quiet again, a touch sadder. The truth is that I've made mistakes, a great many of them. I am human, and I have never suggested otherwise. Another pause. The truth is that I'm just a human trying to make my way through this often painful world, and not make it hurt worse unnecessarily. He motioned vaguely toward her. But there's another truth, Joy. The tension ratcheted up once more in the room. You have a voice that millions of people hear. You have the power to shape perceptions. And what you do with that power is to foster that cynicism. That kindness is always an act, always a trick, always a hustle, and you make people doubt anybody that ever had the inclination to do good in the first place. The audience, who had been totally quiet before this point, became audibly restless. The vibe in the room, I felt, had changed. The equilibrium had shifted, tipping, not towards melodrama or disaster or anything really of the kind, tipping toward Keanu. And Keanu could feel it. You know what I find with people who are so determined to hate everyone else? Keanu continued, still calm, but with an undertone to his voice. The undertone had a tinge of sadness. It's that those people are trying to justify their own behavior. And that was something else. That really seemed to have hit home. The audience went quiet again. A moment of silence. They just cannot believe in kindness being something real. Because in so doing, the way they're acting is not out of necessity. The way that they treat the world. It's a choice. Those were the words, and Keanu let them hang in the air for a moment. And then Joy stood up with startling suddenness. Her chair scraped across the studio floor with the sharp grating of a fracture. The composed expression on her face changed immediately from controlled anger to out-of-control, angry emotions. I'm not going to sit here and have my life interpreted by a character actor, Joy snapped. Keanu just looked at her, without reacting, without even looking startled. You're right. You don't have to, he replied. He paused, and then he softly added, but I have one thing for you to consider before you leave. Joy was going to leave, her hand still resting on the chair, her breath clearly now. Shallow, uneven. Every day you make a decision, Keanu stated, his voice completely even. You could decide to use your words to tear somebody down, or use them to lift them up. You could decide to spread cynicism, or spread hope. A beat. You can expect the worst from somebody, or you could find the good within them. And so far, you've made it quite obvious which one you've chosen. I hope someday you decide to try something different. Silence. Pure. Intense. Utter. Joy stood frozen for an instant, her expression flicking through feelings of anger, embarrassment, and utter bewilderment far too quickly to be contained. And beneath the chaos, the quiet, unsaid understanding that ran through Joy as the underlying emotion. And then, abruptly, I think I need to take a moment. She inhaled, excuse me, and turned on her heel and stalked off set, her stiletto heels clacking as she rounded the corner into the backstage wings. Absolutely nobody moved, or said anything. In 17 years on the air at The View, a co-host had never left their show segment. Not once. Until tonight. The cameras kept rolling to capture the ensuing shock and silence before moving back to Keanu Reeves, calm and seated still, and stood there as though rooted to the floor in the aftermath of a storm. The other hosts were utterly baffled in the silence of the moment. Sarah Haynes had bent her head over her cue cards, as though they would hold some kind of key to existence. Alyssa Farah Griffin kept glancing over to production, hoping for cues that didn't appear. Even Whoopi Goldberg, the host who'd truly been seen it all on daytime television, looked stunned, honestly. She cleared her throat. Well, she said carefully, perhaps we can take a quick commercial break. But Keanu raised a hand, stopping her. "If you'll permit me," he said, "I have just one more thing I would say." "A moment." Whoopi gave a small nod. "Of course." He turned then toward the camera, not his panel, not the studio in which he stood, toward the vast network of people he imagined watching. His voice had become gentle again, yet it reached every inch of that studio. For all those who are watching this right now and who have been told all of their lives that their kindness is foolish, that their compassion is suspect, that wanting to help is dumb. A pause. I want you to understand clearly. A beat. Do not let cynicism dissuade you from your goodness. Another beat. Because what the world truly needs isn't less kindness, masquerading as strength. A breath. It is more kindness, and that chooses to show up anyway. He let that land. Then quietly, he smiled. And with that unmistakable, gentle smile that was his trademark for more than 40 years, Keanu Reeves said, "Be excellent to each other." And in a voice quiet enough to be heard but significant enough to feel, added, "It's not complicated." And in an instant, the room imploded. The applause that met the statement wasn't staged or premeditated. It wasn't a prod from a producer's cue. It was a spontaneous, heartfelt roar, the kind that implies something important just happened here, something you were witness to. And in the next few hours, this moment didn't just trend, it exploded. Clips circulated on every platform imaginable, within minutes followed by headlines, then op-eds, then arguments over what it all meant. Keanu Reeves silences interview, gone wrong with calm truth. Kindness versus cynicism, the moment that divided the internet. Was this accountability or something deeper? The discussion was about what people perceived to be the event. A man refusing to be manipulated into rage, a clash that did not culminate but concluded. And within 24 hours, it coalesced into one prevailing sentiment. Keanu Reeves destroys cynicism with kindness. And then the people who knew Keanu Reeves the best, his co-workers, collaborators, those who had built, fought, and grown with him, began to share their perspective. Chad Stahelski, his director in the John Wick series, wrote, "This is the Keanu I know. Outworks everyone, remembers everyone, treats every person on set with respect. He's not playing a character. He is who he is." Fishburne wrote, "He's kinder than people realize." And today, the world finally saw it clearly. Aziz Ansari added his take. "I have said it before, he is like an angel playing human. Today, people had a chance to see what I mean." His friend of many years and Speed co-star Sandra Bullock had said, 30 years of knowing him, and he never changed. Never not caring. Never not being there for people. Hiroyuki Sanada. He is humble, kind, so disciplined that this is what you all see. It is what we see every day. And Alexandra Grant, his girlfriend, had simply put up a heart. No words were necessary. Because sometimes, words cannot be used for the thing that people know instinctively, but somewhere away from the chaos. Joy Behar sat by herself. The light in her dressing room was much too harsh, much too naked. The Joy Behar the world thought it knew, with its sharp questions and the assured voice, did not feel the same way anymore. The woman was not lost, but lost only momentarily perhaps, and questioned. There was no quick saying to help her for the first time in so long. No one-liner or witty observation could be made to lighten what had happened. Only a question. There were no words. Not out loud anyway. But they had been heard and were insistent. What if? I'm wrong. Eventually, the show moved on as the cameras were brought back into the studio. Segments continued to flow. Cameras kept rolling. The rhythm of professional entertainment returned. However, something had been altered. It was not obvious. It was not obvious by noise. It was forever altered. Because Keanu Reeves had done something that was quite uncommon within a place designed for battling. His voice did not become higher or lower. His need to change was absent. He just maintained his own way of being until everything else came to be so. At the very end of it, Keanu got out of the guest chair, conveyed his thanks in a low voice to the hosts who were present, and walked off the set without seeming to be different at all than how he arrived. Calm and steady. Not in a rush. Without being swayed. And what was left behind at the very end was not a viral battle, nor a demolition. It wasn't even a row. It was not a heated argument. It was quite unique a remembrance. A remembrance of the fact that force is not always a loud announcement. Often force is simply a refusal to become something else entirely. If you gained a different perception of kindness from seeing this episode, make sure you watch out for more of these tales that uncovered some less public aspects of the reality that we all think we know.